your platform hosts a large proportion, tell us how much, Alasdair, of European share trading. But let me just focus in, if I could, on the amount of business you've seen shift then, just today, from London to Paris. You set up an office in Paris. How much business has shifted, and what does that tell us about the way that things will play out from here?
Well, I think it's a fascinating day. I mean, we are the sixth largest exchange in Europe in terms of turnover and do around about 5% market share. 75% of our business has been European business, and that's been conducted in London. And today, overnight, we've seen 99.6% of that business shift to Europe. So Europe has clearly at this point in time won the battle to win its own share trading back into EU 27.
How important then, Alasdair, is your foothold in London or your head office in London? I mean, you're the second biggest UK exchange that trades in EU shares. Why bother with the UK? Why not just, move to Paris? It's a great city.
Well, I think it's important. We view things as a very much a pan-European marketplace, and that means we saw what happened to Equivalence in Switzerland, and you can see that 18 months ago, Switzerland has still not been granted Equivalence. So it's really important to be able to offer investors a single platform to be able to trade on a pan-European environment, and that's exactly what we're doing, which unfortunately means that we have to operate two offices with the ability to trade any European share, UK or EU 27 shares, in either of the markets that we operate. So that is absolutely critical. Investors want to have the ability to be able to trade on a pan-European. And the problem that we've got with what's happened here with Brexit is by the UK losing its passport and with a share trade obligation in Europe, it means that the EU investors have to trade in Europe, and UK investors for European shares will either have to go to Europe or trade in London. And you can clearly see from today that the choice that's being made is that they would rather trade those in Europe, which appears to me to be very much an own goal, a spectacular own goal, as Britain is now losing its very, very strong position in the trading of European equities in London.
And there are many parts of financial services, Alasdair, that have said, yes, we'll be sad to lose the passport, but maybe we can get Equivalence. Maybe that's the next best thing. Will Equivalence make a difference in your line of work? And do you see Equivalence practically coming?
No, I don't. I mean, I think we're seeing a lot of talk from the Chancellor and the government about how we can make Britain a better place for investors, and I'm sure that in a low-tax entrepreneurial environment that may be achieved. I think it's incredibly unlikely that Equivalence will be granted by the EU. We've not seen it being granted to the Swiss. I think there's a lot of political motivation that goes on here in order to do that. And I think all this talk about Equivalence being granted in the next few months is absolutely in dreamland. I think it will take years, if ever, for Equivalence. And I think what London will do and what Britain will do is actually start to change its rules to try and make it a more investor-friendly and a more sort of issuer-friendly environment to try and win business back, but not necessarily to trade European equities in London.
So you don't think that Boris Johnson or whoever is Prime Minister, you don't think that William Russell or whoever is Lord Mayor, these people aren't going to fight for business? They're not going to make any moves to try and get back some of this European share trading that you point out has shifted completely back to the continent?
I think they would like to, but I mean, in this case here, it is incredibly difficult to shift liquidity. We've seen it only happen a few times in history. To do this, I mean, this horse has bolted so far, it's now in a different stable. To get it back, you've got to do something pretty revolutionary here. And I think that is not going to happen in with some negotiations over the next few months. They will definitely try over the next few years. And, it's in Britain's interest. You've got to remember the financial services industry has a trade surplus in Europe of 60 billion. I mean, that is larger than the United States. It's an incredibly important business for the country. And losing the equities business here is an embarrassment. They will certainly try, but what I would say is it's incredibly difficult to achieve.
I guess the UK government, Alasdair, might suggest that there could be other more global opportunities away from where the share trading of European companies takes place, but in green finance and in building bridges to fast-growing parts of the Asian economic universe. Is that an argument that you would buy?
I absolutely would buy. I mean, I don't think that the very fact that one makes a mistake, and I do think it's a mistake, but by allowing European trading to move back to Europe. But I think just having made a mistake doesn't finish London in any means. London has always been an incredibly strong financial centre. London has always been incredibly innovative. And I'm absolutely convinced that, London will look at ways, very, very smart, clever, innovative, technology-driven ways, in order to look at different opportunities around the globe. And that's what it has to do. But I think it's very sad for European investors, because when you fragment liquidity, and at this point in time we do see some fragmented liquidity, what you do is you create a bigger cost for the end investor, and that isn't in the interest of anybody.
How does the City of London then grow, Alasdair, especially for your business, for Aquis?
I think what we want to do, I mean, we've recently become a primary market, the only other primary market to the London Stock Exchange. What I want to do is make absolutely certain that we see the public come back into public markets. In other words, let's make entrepreneurs and make it easier for people to issue their shares, list their shares, and raise capital in a cheaper environment. And I think what the government needs to do here is to make quite certain that the listing process, the issuer process, the trading process for retail and wholesale is easier than it is today, and certainly cheaper than it is today. And I have great high hopes that they can do that, but they can only do that in a low tax environment. And I think what I'm really frightened about is when you read a lot in the media and a lot coming out of government about how they're having to raise taxes, things like capital gains tax going to the marginal tax rates, is very, very frightening for an entrepreneur, because an entrepreneur looking to invest in the UK doesn't want to have the government necessarily as a 45% partner when you set up your business.